That would have been nice, but of course our rep said, I'm losing money, I'm not doing this. And you know that old saying that trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets?
Yep.
We just saw so many examples of, amazing partnerships that had been built up over many years just absolutely crumble because a sales rep said, I'm going to take that deal direct. I'm going to screw over the partner. And so obviously that didn't go well.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Partnerships Unlocked, where we have fast, tactical conversations with some of the top partnerships leaders in the game. I'm very excited today to have the one and only Darren Bibby on with me. Darren, can you please introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about where you've been and what you've done?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me on. I love your podcast. I like the format, and I'm pleased to be a part of it. So as a bit of an intro, I think I've had a super fun career, and I'll try to sort of prove it to you. It's always been in software, and 90% plus has been in partnerships. And I guess I'll give the best story very first. My very first job I ever had in business, other than picking up golf balls, my very first job in business was I was lucky enough to get an internship at Microsoft Canada, and I was on the Windows and Office team in 1995. Now, for those of you old enough, might be you, might not, but the summer of 1995 was the launch of Windows 95, which was just such a massive moment in software. It sort of brought software into households and into conversations. And so to be there at that time, we put a banner on the side of the CN Tower up here in Toronto. It was just a massive thing. I snuck into the company sales meeting. I mean, I got in, but can you imagine an intern being invited to the global sales meeting? I met Bill Gates, got a photo with him. And I'm like a very skinny 19 or 20-year-old or whatever it was. It was amazing, right? Just an amazing, unreal start. So that propelled me to do the first 10 years of my career in the Microsoft ecosystem. I did a couple more internships, just got to meet everyone at Microsoft Canada. That helped me when I went on to a couple of Microsoft partners. And I always had sales roles, marketing roles, working with customers, selling Microsoft solutions. And then for the rest of my career, having that point of view of being a partner was just awesome. I then ended up going to work for Microsoft Canada again, running the Microsoft Partner Program during a time where Microsoft was releasing partner points, competencies. This was the first time any of this had been done in a partner program. So that was super cool. I then pivoted and became an analyst at IDC, the research and analyst firm. And that was just an amazing opportunity. I worked with all the best companies in the world, Microsoft, SAP, IBM, AWS, Salesforce, and I got to work with them daily. You got to go to all their conferences, got to meet all the folks who kind of run this industry for those 10 years. I led a team of 7 analysts. We wrote lots of thought leadership reports in the industry. I counted up over 100 consulting projects with these types of companies over that time. And my favorite part of all of that, and you'll see the relevance to today's world for me, is I did a lot of public speaking. I used to go out and speak at a lot of these events, and I really enjoyed doing that. And then about 10 years ago, and by the way, that's my IDC 10 years. It's all kind of everything in 10 years. 10 years ago, right about this week, I started working for Docusign as VP of Partner Strategy and Program. So one of my best contacts, I was his reference going over to Docusign. He brought me on as sort of his number 2 in the partnerships org to just run the whole partner operating system. Like, what did we need for our partners? What did we need internally to make it all work? And so that was amazing. And that was from 2016 to 2021. Company went public in that time. COVID hit in that time, and we were one of those companies that, like most people hated COVID. It was very good for Docusign. At one point, I remember telling my team, we are now more valuable than United Airlines and Ford Motor Company put together. That didn't last, but it lasted for quite a while. That market optimism, went away, but just an incredible time to be at that company. And from when I got there, we were about 15% partner contribution to deals, to when I left 5.5 years later, we were almost 45% of revenue was touched and impacted by partners. So, and all the while the company grew like threefold. So it was a 9 to 10x of improvement, of growth in the partner business. So that was super cool. My family and I had moved to the Bay Area for that. We moved back to Canada. Again, that you can kind of figure out that valuation. That all went very well for me. Moved back, took time off, started my own consultancy on strategy and programs and partnering. I started working with companies like Boomi Software, iSIMS, the applicant tracking system, and others. And I've largely been doing that for the last 5 years. I did have a very interesting year and a half at Shopify, kind of the hometown Toronto company. And we launched their first enterprise partner portal. They were kind of catching up on a lot of these things. And their first tiered program, which is still going today. And about 2,000 partners we were able to assign to tiers. And they never had anything like that before. So it's sort of bringing them up to working the enterprise. And then, as you know very well, I've been working very closely with partnership leaders. You and I were just at the Toronto event together. I know you've been at all the others. I know I'm going to be working with you on some of the events you're doing in Europe. And so working with them on speaker coaching, working with them on some of their clients and consulting, it's just been a great opportunity to work with them.
That's awesome. I love that. Quite the varied experience. And I'm sure you'll have some interesting perspective as someone that did not just spend their whole career in partnerships. And from obviously a program and operations standpoint. So I think you know the format. We usually go through asking kind of what's one play or tactic that you've done and maybe done multiple times and that worked out really well for you, and kind of what did you learn and why did it work? My more favorite question is what one didn't work, what, by all intents and purposes, maybe not a moonshot, but it seemed like it should work, maybe blew up in your face and it was a really valuable learning that you've taken on with you. And then at the end, we'll jump into maybe a little bit of a lightning round of what are just 2 to 3 other unlocks that you wish you knew earlier in your career.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm ready. Do you want me to jump into the unlock?
Yeah, let's start with the thing that worked.
So as I was mentioning, I was at the various companies. It's going to be a little bit obvious, kind of maybe what's what, but the story I wanted to share on this topic of unlock was about how sales reps were comped at one of the companies I was at. We had resellers. We had some with a 30% reseller discount, 40% if it went through distribution, and we had some 50-50 revenue share with partners. Now, when I got there, this meant that the sales reps who were always on these deals, they're just, that was the way it worked. And I think it's always good to make sure your sales reps are on deals, even if partners are. If you try to separate them into these are for partners and these deals are for sellers, direct sellers, you can have a lot of conflict. So, this was less conflict, but still, if you can imagine that a rep goes out and says, this deal's worth 10K, a partner's in there and they have to give 30%, 40%, 50% to the partner. And when I got there, they were only getting comped on the net. So it's not that these sellers hated partners. They hated getting 30, 40, 50% off on their comp, right? They, very coin driven. So you can imagine what happened, right? Like we would like to say, I get the overall strategy. We're going to work with these partners. Maybe they'll bring me another deal. That would have been nice. But of course, our rep said, I'm losing money. I'm not doing this. And you know that old saying that trust is earned in drops and lost in buckets?
Yep.
We just saw so many examples of, amazing partnerships that had been built up over many years just absolutely crumble because a sales rep said, I'm going to take that deal direct. I'm going to screw over the partner. And so obviously that didn't go well. So the solution, the unlock, was compensation neutrality. Now, it's easy to say, but it was one of the hardest things I've worked on and one of the most rewarding things. It took a very long time. My strategy was to just take in all of the feedback I could get from our partner account managers. What's going on out there? Go talk to some of the salespeople. Like, why did you do that to that partner? What's going on? Just be honest, But one of the biggest things for me was I had this amazing network, and I can only imagine if partnership leaders was around at the time, because I was able to go to my network and say, are you guys doing this? Yes or no? How did you get it done? Why? I've got this great slide deck. I may or may not still have it, but of that whole business case of what other companies were doing, what the partners were saying about this. And some of the quotes were just so striking. We had one reseller And the one lady said, we know not to, give deals to you guys because you'll just take them away. And you're like, everything we're doing, we have a whole group just trying to work on these reseller deals, and they're just being, negated. So it was a lot of working to get that feedback and presenting that in a smart way. It was a lot of work with finance to figure out what uplift for the sales team would we have to incur to be able to pay for the fact that we want to give you 100% quota relief on these reseller deals, knowing that the company only gets 50, 60, 70% of the deal. So we did that math, we worked it out, and again, it was uneven. More reseller deals in EMEA, more reseller deals, the enterprise ones were with the 50-50, and then some. So we had to figure all that out, very complicated. In the end, our chief revenue officer and our head of all field said, if we're going to do resellers, we got to do this. There's just no going on. But I think the other kind of lesson in my career was that took over 2 years to get through. I knew the problem on day one, but to be able to, convince a very direct sales minded organization. Remember I said we went from 15% to 45 at the beginning, partners, resellers were an afterthought. They weren't going to do it. So it took multiple planning cycles. So I think one of the lessons for me is that, you've got to have a bit of a longer runway and a longer timeline on some of these things because they're not simple to get implemented. So I don't know if you've seen this before or made sense, but that's sort of the inside baseball on something that absolutely unlocked a massive amount of business. Now the partners were happy to work with us. Our guys were happy to work with the partners. And it was a massive unlock.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's going to necessarily surprise anyone here that, one, it helped for sellers to not be undercutting partners, and two, that sellers didn't want to make less money on deals. But I'm sure a lot of people have experienced this. I mean, I know I have. It's interesting that the company went both reseller and direct, but didn't find a clean way or didn't think through a clean way to really kind of separate church and state in that scenario. What was, by the way, I think people will be curious, because in some reseller circumstances, the salesperson's not really involved, internal salesperson, the reseller just kind of handles it all. What was the reasoning that there was a reseller involved and a salesperson involved, and both obviously needed to be comped?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was thinking about that same thing, why our reps always got involved. One it was the product itself was a little bit specific and had some unusual traits to it that, you can enable partners on some of the key things, but once one of the customers asked 1, 2, or 3 questions, they were like, oh, I got to go back to the company anyway to get help. So I think it was the product itself. They typically needed help. I think that our sales reps just wanted to know everything that was going on in their area. It didn't end up and it was a premium product. They didn't want to kind of give up a lot of the price, and therefore they had to defend a lot of things. And why not go with a competitor? So yeah, it just sort of worked out that the rep was very involved in every single deal along the way, and we couldn't shake that. We couldn't not at least for kind of mid-market and up.
So I would guess the organization, as many do, started direct and then moved into reseller. Interesting. Yeah. And ultimately, what is it the reason that you think that the company decided when they had that moment to say, hey, either we're doing this or we're not doing this, but we're not going to do this the wrong way?
Yeah.
What is it that chose them to move forward with, hey, we definitely want to do reseller?
It became a big enough part of the business. Like I said, I was there on this journey from 15% to 45% partner impacted business. And at 15%, it was sort of this annoying little issue with one part of the business that's just growing. They weren't going to change everybody's. This required changing the way every salesperson in the company was comped to put something like this in, right? And so it just there was just limited people and resources and time to work on stuff. This just didn't make the radar for enough time until it became a big enough deal. And there was I can remember a couple of very big deals where the partner got absolutely thrown under the bus. And that sort of, woke some people up to, oh, maybe we should look at this again. This is a bigger deal than I thought. So it just was a critical mass type of situation.
That makes sense. And just from my purview, it seems that reseller is becoming a more popular, in general, obviously partnerships and channel is seeing an upswing right now as companies seek to grow efficiently, and for many other reasons. What if a company was looking at starting reseller today? What, based on your learnings, are some pieces of advice you would give them in thinking of, like, if you're going to do reseller, these are considerations you should have in mind, and these are things you should consider from a structure perspective?
Yeah, I think the very first is just like, will this work through resellers? Like, there's a lot of different kinds of resale. There's embedded resale with ISVs. There is resell where we had a very big government reseller, and they would add a very small amount of margin on top. So it actually wasn't so big a deal with conflict, but it was a contractual reason to have a reseller. And then sort of for the broader market, we were trying to work with distributors and resellers, big brand name resellers. And, it didn't always just fit the model, right? One of the things we realized is one of the competitors had people, in the offices of CDW, Soft Choice, all these big resellers. And like, if you had to play that game and one of your competitors is actually in the office, like, what amount of investment did you have to sort of play that reseller game? So there's just a lot of questions about, like, is there a demand for it? Will this work? Are they also reselling things that kind of are adjacent to you? Like, is that working? So there's a lot of just sort of like understanding the market realities. I would absolutely interviewing these guys, asking them if it would work. Tell us other products that you have, it works, why it works. Distribution is often a way to get out to all of those smaller value-added resellers. It totally depends on what that product is, and if it's a very small margin, they're not going to work hard for it. They're not going to do the enablement. If you're going to give them a much bigger margin, are they doing something for it? Are they are going to be enabled and have those difficult conversations? Like, they know the product well enough. Like I said, a lot of times, 2 questions came in from a customer, they're like right back to the vendor asking questions, So the other one is just kind of culturally in your own company. Do they understand resellers? I had a situation where the company, again, took a lot of time. We had a collections department where reseller hadn't paid in the 30 days, and the collections department wanted to get paid. They didn't really understand what a reseller was, and they started calling anyone who was on that account looking for the money. Well, what ended up happening? They got in touch with the customer and said, "You owe us this money," and they're like, "No, we paid the reseller for it." And there's some very embarrassing situations, and when you have someone asking for money and it's they don't really owe it. And that scenario kind of played itself out in multiple divisions that, again, they weren't up culturally on resale. And so I think that if you're going to get into resale, it's not a panacea. It's not a silver bullet. It takes a lot of work and a lot of thinking to make it work. Has to be right.
That's great. That is a wealth of good advice. So jumping into another piece of advice of what is something that you tried, you had all the highest hopes for, by all logic it should have worked, and it either didn't work or more theatrically blew up in your face, but you learned something valuable from it.
Yeah, definitely learned from. I'm going to stick with trying to get salespeople to work with your partners. And when I got into this, one of the companies, I could understand that the salespeople weren't caring about partners or working with them enough. And I thought, okay, well, we just got to teach them. Partnerships are great, right? Partners are awesome. We just got to teach them about it. And so I started pulling together some enablement. I looked at kind of what was already being done. And, we're going to do some lunch and learns we got an hour at each new employee onboarding up in Seattle every month. We had a huge amount of people starting, most of them salespeople. I'm going to tell them everything there is to know about partners. I'm going to tell them why we need them, who they are. I'm going to tell you how to work with referral, reseller partners, ISV partners, da-da-da-da-da-da. This is an awesome deck. And you might know where this is going, but there was one moment when it all kind of struck me that this was way too much for them to handle. I remember in Seattle standing in front of this group, and I love public speaking, having a little bit of fun, said, who can tell me what an ISV is? And out of a room of 130 new employees, yes, they're shy. They're just starting a new company, and I can be a lot. So I asked them this, and one hand kind of sheepishly goes up. What's an ISV? International sales. I'm like, oh. And it kind of struck me in that moment, like, these guys don't understand partnerships. They don't understand what a referral agreement is. They don't understand resale. A lot of them are young, coming in as SDRs, MDRs. And it was kind of in that moment, I was like, we just got to dumb this down. We got to make this so simple for them. They don't give a crap about partners until they need to, until there's one in their deal. So that was just a huge lesson that I always remember. Like I remember the conversation. We got to bring this down to like a grade 3 level, right? Like just make it, this is why we use them. Here's some great stories. Sometimes we could point to, hey, the best salespeople out there went to club based on working with, X amount of partners, right? The more partners they worked with, the better they did. And hey, look at their suntan. So like we would change it into very high level. And then here's where you go for help, right? In our case at the time, it was like a partners at, vendor.com. Just our team is ready to answer any question, get you help, and they'll respond to you within minutes. Right, get us on Slack to this group. We will get back to you right away. So that was a huge lesson that they are not ready to take it all in. They are not ready to learn all this stuff until they're ready. The other part to the answering their reluctance to learn is just like get in their workflow. So if their workflow, they're spending 90% of their day in Salesforce, wherever you can in Salesforce, put how to work with partners or about partners or where to go for help. And so, even we had like just a sort of like a business description open field and in capital letters, this is a reseller, talk to this person first, or this is the program guide to go check out, or we just make it so obvious in front of them. And things in partner tech have come a long way since then, like Crossbeam and the like, that's like right in front of them. That idea of like just being where they are when they need it, that's how to enable salespeople about partners. It's a bit of a fool's errand to say, let's get a big lunch and learn together and let's go through from A to Z on how this works. That was sort of, I don't know if it blew up in my face, but to me it felt like it.
I mean, yeah, I think anybody listening to this that has ever tried to educate internal or external sales teams, for that matter, has experienced what you just described and realized like, oh, we have to, it's why I now tell people, I was like, partner enablement is your sales enablement 10 times simpler.
Yeah.
And like just 10 times smaller,
That's
right?
it.
Like
Yeah.
what are the 3 words you want them to think of? And what are the 3 things you want them to know that this benefits them in?
If you hear this, give us,
If you hear this, and if you do it to your point, you're going to be getting that suntan at President's Club. Like it really.
Yep.
And then my first VP of partnerships used to call this waves on the beach. You just have to keep doing it over and over.
That's
and
the
over
other
again.
lesson. That's right. Yeah, keep that up. One of the other ones that worked well was going into a sales kickoff. I worked with our analyst internally and I said, can you just like give us some great stats on how we're doing with partner deals versus direct deals? And we came up with all sorts of good, but we, again, simplifying it down. We came up with, the deals with a partner involved are 2.5 times the normal deal size. And that was our data, and so like, and then we would tell everyone in the partnerships org, they would repeat it. It was on the slides at the SKO. So to that point, it's like, in different ways, just continue to repeat that message, keep pushing the flywheel in that same direction.
Yeah. That's great. I love that because everybody needs to be reminded of that constantly because you got to be educating.
Yeah.
Well, you've shared a ton of unlocks already, but are there any other kind of quick hitters that come to mind that you just wish you knew earlier in your career?
Yeah, if in retrospect, the thing I regret is I think kind of two things overall, and I think everyone can identify with this. Once you get a new job, there is always a pressure to get stuff done in your role, and like I'm Darren and I'm going to make an impact, and I'm going to get a great deck out to the whole team like quickly, and like you just really need the time to learn. So I regret not talking to more partners and salespeople and learning how they worked, and Pam's just even customers if possible, is just like, before you go trying to do a thing in your role that you're supposed to do, like just even if it seems unpopular, go talk to as many people as you can. Because I would learn things like a year in, I'm like, why didn't I know that? And so that was on my position, working in new companies. It's just like I never got enough time with the people to learn before trying to do stuff. And then I think the flip side of that is, as I've done consulting with so many companies, only very few have a true kind of voice of the partner program that will then, it's like, do you remember Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Yeah. He talks about, he had this chart of what's important and what's urgent. And we're all working on the important, urgent stuff all the time, right? Those are kind of the fires and stuff that's like big customer and they need something right away. You have like not urgent and not important, like TikTok videos, cell phone calls. Like the quadrant you want to focus on, that you need to focus on long term, is the important but not urgent. That's the voice of the partner stuff. It's like hygiene, it's like exercise, it's like all the stuff like you need to be doing. Because if you have that voice of the partner, it's like partner advisory councils, doing surveys with them, like getting all of that feedback in to inform every program you run, every sales enablement you run. Like that's one of those things that like in so many companies, it's just not good enough. It's not there. It's an ad hoc thing. Like, oh, we're doing a conference, let's bring a few partners together. That voice of the partner program, no matter how big a company you are, it should just be like that exercise routine you're doing every month, every quarter, every week, whatever that is, right? Like that's one that I think people need to do more of.
Yes, I would largely agree with that. That's probably, if I was the one being interviewed on this, I would say that's the thing I learned. One of the key things is like, understand the customer before you do anything else. And because that should be at the center of all of it. Darren, this has been awesome. Usually when these go long, in my head, I'm like, we probably could have cut out some of that fluff in the conversation, but this has been action-packed with value. I'm sure anybody that listens is going to be super excited about it. So thank you so much for joining and taking the time to share your wisdom here.
Thanks, Greg. It's a pleasure.